Right now, I am very honored to introduce our next speaker, who is Steve Mason. Steve is one of the finest and most experienced broadcasters in America today. Steve is a mental health advocate speaking openly about his 2002 bipolar diagnosis. He also came out as gay on ESPN in 2015. He has co-hosted the nationally broadcast The Late Late Show with Tom Snyder, anchored Good Day LA in Los Angeles, hosted a morning drive radio on WNEW in New York, anchored 7 Olympic Games for NBC. Wow. And since 2004 has co-hosted Mason and Ireland, the #1 rated radio sports show in Los Angeles. So I thank you for being here, Steve. He's going to be joined in conversation with Hunter Canning, who, Hunter, I just realized the recording you did is also playing on track 2 right now. So you're not in 2 places. You're live here with us on track A. Track 2 is a recording of you. But with that, I'm going to hand things over to both of you. Have a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob. That's my Gemini. I can be in 2 places at once. Steve Mason, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. It's truly a pleasure. So, I'm really excited to, talk about your unique experiences in being part of the, sports community, being a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, being part of, your mental health advocacy. So, but let's go back to 2015, 2016, and set the stage and, what was going on for you in that time. And because there was a lot of stuff that we talked a little bit before, there's a lot of stuff going on for you in that time.
Yeah, it was probably the craziest period of my life. A lot happened in 2016. My best friend passed away. My dad passed away. I came out as gay in 2016. It was a decision that took me years to get to. I had lived, with this secret through my growing up years and towards my early part of my broadcast career. Ultimately, I started coming out to people when I was probably 28 years old. And that process continued to the point where I actually came out on the air in 2016.
And so what did you find? Was there something? Why 2016? What was going on before? Or did you think it would maybe get in the way, or do you think it might hinder something, or what was keeping you from doing it publicly?
Yeah, I genuinely thought it would. And it was in my head. I genuinely thought it was going to hurt my career. I genuinely thought this was going to torpedo what I spent years and years building. Now, I'd ultimately gotten to the point where it was almost ridiculous. Everybody I knew, everybody I worked with was aware of it. And I felt like there was, it was time to sort of pass that. And it came out, and I didn't want it to be a big deal. I didn't want it to turn into a gigantic event. A NFL player went to the combine, or a college player at that point went to the NFL combine, and he was asked if he was gay. And we started talking about that particular issue and that series of questions that he got. And I decided this is a perfect organic way for me to go ahead and come out. My expectations were that there was going to be controversy, that it was going to be difficult, that I would hear negative, on Twitter and on social media. The reality is that, in our business, authenticity is kind of what carries the day. I learned that over the years. People like Howard Stern and broadcasters through the years, the more transparent they were, the more connection they had to their audience. In this case, everybody really surprised me because there was no negative reaction. It was all positive. I don't think I've ever gotten a hateful tweet. I don't think I've ever gotten negative on Instagram, on social media, callers, nobody, listeners that I happen to meet, nobody has reacted in anything but a positive way and a supportive way. So it turned into a really, really rewarding experience.
Mm. Have you found if people reached out and said, because you did that, that gave me confidence? Have you had any coming out relations in that way?
Yeah, well, my DMs are always open on Twitter. So I have heard from people. And as a result, I've wound up mentoring some people who are going through this same situation, not necessarily in broadcasting, but in their professional lives. And, everybody comes out at their own pace. They come out in their own way. There are levels of coming out. There's your family, and then there are the people you work with, and then there's whatever's public. And in my case, the public part was the challenging part. I can't tell you the number of people that have reached out to me on social media. People have reached out to me personally and asked for my advice, and I welcome that sort of mentorship role. I didn't really have any mentors when I was going through this process. I didn't have anybody that I could turn to and get their feelings and their sense of where I was and what was happening. And so for me to play that mentor role is really, really important to me. It's an important part of my, in addition to my broadcast career, my mission as a person, I think that's definitely part of it.
Mm. And what does that mentor, how does that role show up for you? Is it like, call me anytime, let's do like weekly check-ins, or how do you structure that? Or is it, I'm sure it changes from person to person.
It does change person to person. I mean, I've talked to a couple of people who are in genuine crisis, and those people, I pay more attention to. People who really feel like this is going to destroy their family, destroy their job, people who are genuinely in crisis over it. And then the other conversations are, I'm thinking about doing this. I might do it. I don't know how people are going to react. And I think that, again, I don't try to tell anybody how to do it because, I came out when I was 28. A lot of people now in particular come out when they're, I met a kid last week who came out when he was 16. I'm like, wow, came out when he was 16. I labored over this for 28 years. So it's definitely become less of a barrier. But I do try to stay in touch with those people either by email or by phone. I spent time on the phone with particular people for hours over a period of a few months as they kind of go through this process, and walking them through as best that I can. And in a lot of cases, it's encouraging people that it's not going to be as hard as you think it is. It gets very, very built up in your head, and it feels really dramatic. I have a rule in life: expect the best, and the best is usually what you get from people. And I think that's what the majority of people that I've worked with and mentored have experienced, is that the world was a warm and welcoming place for them. Given their full identity and their authenticity as a person. There are, of course, exceptions to that, but for the most part, I feel like many of the people that I work with have had a seamless and happy experience in coming out.
I love that. And so you also talked about earlier, you mentioned, people that were in real crisis, and that could be maybe what they're coming out, but also some things that you work with is with mental health. And can you speak to your personal journey and your discovery with that, and how maybe some challenges before you were diagnosed versus after, and how that can help you help others?
Yeah. So in 2002, I was diagnosed as bipolar, and I was having a really rough time in my life. It clearly, as I look back at my family, it clearly is part of my family history. I saw it, with my dad. I saw it with other relatives that were in my family. And I decided I was going to figure out a way to sort of crack the code. And it really was cracking the code. So I was going through a period where I had left New York City, where I was doing mornings at WNEW in New York. It was a really tough job. It sort of spun me out. And in working with my psychiatrist, we did find the right, both in conversation, in talk therapy, and in terms of medicines as prescriptions, as pharmaceuticals. That combination is what sort of solved, or at least allowed me to kind of manage my mental health. And I always tell people, and I talk to a lot of people who deal with bipolar disease or anxiety or depression. What I think is really important is we live in this take a pill society. And the reality is that it takes both some sort of medication and an ongoing conversation. And there are still periods of time where I sail up, which, by the way, being manic sounds like it might be kind of fun. I'm getting a lot done and I'm really busy. I'm doing exciting things. Very dangerous. Mania can be very dangerous. And then depression. The reality is that it's an ongoing battle to manage your mental health situation. And that's for people, by the way, who do have psychiatric issues, who do have obsessive compulsive disorder or bipolar or any number of psychiatric conditions, but also just for everybody, managing your mental health on a daily basis, whether it's by exercise or it's by diet or it's by communicating in an open way with your spouse or your partner. All those things I think are important for everybody in terms of managing your mental health. I had the great fortune, I'm in a 16-year relationship. And so my partner will often say, hey, is everything okay? Are you doing okay? And I think it's really important to have that sounding board, whether it's a spouse or partner, or it's a best friend. It's somebody that you can really, really trust, who you may say, how's my thinking right now? Can you check my thinking? What's going on for me right now? What are you noticing about me? And to use somebody as a sounding board to kind of deal with that ongoing mental health issue. And I am here to say it is manageable. It can be managed. And you, as long as you're an active participant in your mental health, you can live a very healthy and full and abundant life.
And would you say there are specific challenges that come up for, LGBT folks and athlete professionals, specific mental health challenges that might come up for them?
Well, I think we've seen that in the last couple of years now. Simone Biles at the Olympics withdrew from several competitions because she was struggling with mental health issues. That's happened with a number of NBA players, whether it's Ben Simmons in Philadelphia or Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn. A lot of players have talked about this. And, we think of athletes as, these millionaires. They have so much money. They live such a glamorous and amazing lifestyle. But the reality is there's a lot of pressure on an NBA player on a night-to-night basis, or an athlete going into an Olympic event. There's a lot of pressure. And I think the fact that athletes have been more open in talking about this in the last couple of years is a really, really healthy development. We take so many of our cultural cues from sports. It is for example, in my family, if you couldn't talk sports, you really couldn't have a conversation. You needed to be able to talk sports in my family. And the fact that so many people are like that, so many families are like that, so many men in particular are like that, to see an athlete that they admire, that they root for, that they cheer for, openly talk about the issues they're having, I think has opened the door to eliminating this stigma that goes along with mental health issues, particularly for men. I mean, in my dad's generation, I think it was viewed as a weakness. You're soft. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You have to just get over this. You just have to move on. All that kind of stuff was commonplace in a previous generation. Now, because athletes are talking openly about it, I think it opens the door for that conversation in a lot of families, and particularly with a lot of men.
And how do you think the sports world is doing? So it sounds like you've had a pretty positive experience in your receptivity and with your mental health, with your coming out. But how do you feel like the sports world is doing as a whole? Like, can there be more to be done to be more inclusive and supportive of people in both of these communities, maybe the crossover of these communities?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think that in terms of mental health, we're probably moving more quickly than we are with LGBTQ issues. I think that because these are prominent athletes and frankly role models and heroes to a lot of people, because they're opening up and talking about these situations that they're dealing with these mental health issues, I think it's opening the door for more conversation. In the case of LGBTQ issues, I think that we have a long way to go. I'm not saying that the world is now welcoming, but we've really only seen one athlete in North American sports, North American team sports, that has come out. We've seen individual athletes, particularly at the Olympics. We've seen a lot of athletes come out in individual sports, but the only professional athlete in one of the 4 North American professional team sports has been Carl Nassib of the Oakland Raiders, I'll never get over that. The Las Vegas Raiders. And he's had a very, very positive experience. Now, I don't know what it's like inside that locker room. I don't know how he is treated on a day-to-day basis. He's a very good player, which I think makes a difference. I have another friend, Jason Collins, who came out in terms of an NBA player, and this was probably now 8 or 9 years ago, came out. He was at the tail end of his career. And again, he got a very warm reception. I don't know what it's like in those locker rooms, but I do know that the negative stereotype still exists. And there's still this feeling that somehow, if you come out as gay, as a professional athlete, there is a stigma that goes along with that. And I think we've got a long way to go with that in terms of sports.
And can you think of ways that could be incite change on the inside, maybe small things that teams could do, or heads of different companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that having, for example, at ESPN, I've got unbelievable support at ESPN. When I was debating whether or not to come out, I was able to talk to somebody, human resources for all of ESPN, about the best way to handle it. And I think that's one of the things that I think would make a huge difference, is if there were counselors, advisors, by the way, on both of these issues, on both mental health and LGBTQ issues, more advisors, more in terms of human resources, more in terms of trust. I think that one of the things that people are afraid of, that athletes are afraid of, is that if they go to somebody in authority within a sports organization, that somehow that's going to become a gigantic issue. I think that if we have more sensitive managers, and I think we're starting to have that. Rick Welts was the president of the Golden State Warriors. He is a gay man. He's not there anymore, but spent many years there. I mean, I think the more generationally things change, the more things will get better. There is still this idea that a professional athlete in a locker room is going to cause a disruption. I think Carl Nassib could be a significant figure, because he has demonstrated that you're a good player, you're a good player. I think Paul Brown once said, I don't care if you're black, white, or striped like a zebra. If you can play, you can play. And I think there's an element of that going on. Carl Nassib's really good. That's made a difference. I think will be easier for a star player, one who's got a dramatic set of skills, to come out than it will be for more of a fringe talent, somebody who's not a star, somebody who is a role player, somebody who contributes but isn't the most important player on the team. And there are definitely players that are out there. There are definitely star players who are gay. Obviously, we've seen in the WNBA, it's not an issue at all. We've seen many female athletes come out as lesbian. But in terms of men, it's much more difficult. It's much more challenging. But I think it's a case of, if one big player comes out, one star player, Carl Nassib's really good. I wouldn't call him a star. One star player comes out, I think it gets better for everybody.
So there's a question that came in from the audience. So we're talking about these, people that are on top of their game, and they're also, D1 college athletes and Olympians. But it's a question that came in going back, taking us to the youth. Research shows the fear of discrimination prevents the LGBTQIA youth from participating in sports in school. Do you have any views on this?
Yeah, I think that, again, this is representative of a view in society that somehow being part of a team and being a member of the community makes you feel less than. I mean, there's this idea of team, right? And in the best sense of it, it's nobody is the star. Everybody is sort of part of the same group. And if somehow you're made to feel different, if you're made to feel like you don't belong in some way, sports isn't necessarily as welcoming to you. Again, there are exceptions to this now. We've seen a lot of D1 athletes come out in a variety of sports, not necessarily the four prominent North American professional sports, NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL. We've not seen a lot of athletes in those sports, but in individual sports, we've seen it a lot. I feel like it's a matter of time. I feel like, a lot of times I'll say to somebody who's close to coming out, the water is warm. Go ahead and jump in. The water is really warm. I mean, the world will be far more receptive to you than you believe. And of course, there are exceptions to that, but I think for the most part, that's been my experience. And in terms of D1 athletes, I think you want to be part of a team and you don't want to, quote unquote, stick out. I think, again, a new generation of coaches, younger coaches who have grown up in a very different world. We saw Coach Mike Krzyzewski retire as head coach of Duke this last weekend after 120 years or whatever it was. He's going to be replaced by a younger guy, a more progressive guy, a more thoughtful guy. Not to say he wasn't those things, but from a different generation. I think we're seeing coaches younger and younger. My favorite team, the Rams, has got a 36-year-old head coach. He views the world much differently than Bill Belichick of the New England Patriots, who's close to 70 years old. So I think that as coaches become younger, as cultures become younger, we're going to see more athletes feel comfortable coming out.
Mm-hmm. And so when you had so much experience of your revealing parts about yourself and learning about yourself at the same time in the public eye. Now, I don't know if you have anything else to compare it to, but can you speak what that's like about how you got to, pretty much have a world audience in your transformation?
Well, my advantage was that I had I don't want to say world, I had a steady audience before any of this happened. And I think that I had earned the trust of a lot of listeners, viewers, followers over the years. And so I had that advantage. This was kind of the one more thing, I'll let you behind the curtain for this one last thing so that you know me. And it's been a point of connection, I think, for a lot of people. In the case of people who aren't in the public eye, people who, are going to their job every day and are really nervous about the way people are going to react. It happens a little bit at a time. Find that one friend or that spouse or partner, find that one friend and think it through, realize that it's probably not as cataclysmic as your thing. For me, I always felt my life, my career was a house of cards. And at any moment, if somebody found out, it was all going to come tumbling down. A lot of people have that feeling. And it takes a long time to get to the point where you feel like it's going to be okay. I have enough people who know me, who support me, who love me, that the world isn't going to come toppling down. And so, I think it does come down to having those close friends, having those close relationships, slowly letting people from work and your career into sort of your real life experiences, and building from there.
If you could go back in time and give yourself some advice before you came out, what would it be?
It would be, not only is it not going to be bad, it's going to be really good, and it's actually going to be good for your career. That's what I would tell people. I was very, very, very lucky because I had a well-established career and people knew who I was. So for me, again, being authentic about everything has been a plus for me because people feel like they know me in a more intimate way. What we do for a living, particularly on radio, you're in somebody's ear pods or you're somebody's office or in their car by themselves. It's a very intimate sort of medium. And to be able to connect in that way and to give people another point of connection, another point of authenticity has been nothing but good for me.
I love hearing that for you. So we got to wrap up in just a minute here. Is there any final thoughts, maybe some advice you could give to maybe like, how can we help as a whole? What can we, actionable things we can do to help, make people feel supported in these communities?
Well, I think that trust is probably critical in this, in both of these areas, both in terms of mental health and in terms of LGBTQ issues. I think that you've got to find people that you trust, people that you can share your honest feelings with, people that you can just get real with. Not everybody has that. Not everybody has that one friend. Not everybody has that one person, that spouse, that partner, that best friend. Not everybody has that. And I think what we all need to do is to be very, very receptive and in tune with the people we work with and offer any support that we can, to be understanding, to be accepting, to be receptive, to be willing to go to that one next level of friendship, and really find a way to support somebody that is dealing with either of these issues on an ongoing basis. We can all be better listeners, better communicators, and people that can be trusted with information as somebody goes through the process of letting other people know what's really going on in their lives.
Thank you for that sage advice. This has been a great conversation. Steve Mason, thank you so much. You can find Steve. He's very active on Twitter. You can see him shaving off his eyebrow last month. I highly recommend that clip. That's one of my favorites. It's looking good, by the way. Looking real
Thank
nice.
you. It actually grew back. Yeah, I was happy with that. Happy with that.
Thank you so much, Mason.
Thank
This
you.
has been fantastic.
Thanks
for having me.
Thank you, Hunter. Have a great rest of your day, Steve. Thank you. It was an honor hearing you and hearing your journey.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.